If AI can do everything, then what's left for you, or for me, or for humanity in the future? Let's get into it and have a look. Wherever you look, AI is taking over. Writing, coding, designing, diagnosing. And the question everyone's asking me, and the question I'm hearing everywhere, is how do I stay relevant in this transition and transformation? How do I protect my income when machines can think faster, do a better job, be more reliable, work longer, never sleep, and ultimately be cheaper? It's not just about jobs disappearing. This is about human thought itself. We're living through one of the most extraordinary transitions in history. One that we can all feel it's all having an impact on us, but we can't really even pinpoint or describe it fully yet. As humans, the ground beneath us is inherently shifting on how we earn, think and create value. And this time it's not because of governmental shifts or globalization or recession or economics. It's because of intelligence itself. It's because of the shift in how we are starting to develop through the use of technology. For the first time, we're using and we've developed a form of intelligence that can reason, summarize, predict and even improvise. And what that's doing is that's forcing us all to ask a very poignant question. What happens to my career, my future, my earning potential and my existence when thinking is no longer uniquely human? You see, when you strip back every job that's out there, from surgeon to teacher to consultant, these jobs all exist because someone else out there is willing to pay for another person's thinking. But if thinking becomes a commodity, something that machines can mass produce at scale, then what happens to the value of human thought? That's the real question behind the panic about AI and job loss. It's not about losing employment. It's about losing purposeful relevance. This is nothing new. In recent years, a lot of companies have been struggling with the way in which we work, the way in which individuals in the workplace communicate and do jobs and do everything. There are a lot of positions that seemingly have very little purpose, very little understanding, because they cannot see or feel what level of importance they have. Performance goes down, tenure goes down, ethics, immoralities, all of these things have a massive impact. Company culture gets affected. Let's look at some of the history of this. And I'm going to phrase this as the loss of friction. I've mentioned in previous videos that capitalism and the way in which our businesses all run effectively run on inefficiency. So in this video, I'm just going to call that friction. For thousands of years, progress has entirely depended on that friction. And the human brain evolved to handle that. So we have developed our brains through friction, through wrestling with difficulty, trying to find patterns and things that we can compare to other situations to find a solution, essentially surviving through problem solving. Every time we've encountered friction, so the need to grow some food, to manage scarcity, to organise trade, to govern complexity, we have built systems in order to deal with that. We've built industries, we've built economies, we've built ideologies. So capitalism in its most basic and fundamental form is simply our collective obsession with managing friction to create profit. So taking that a little bit further, what happens when you remove that friction by implementing technology and specifically AI? When AI can not only automate the processes, but also can do the thinking as well. When the challenges that used to make us valuable, so analysis, communication, synthesis, persuasion, become instantly replicable. We're calling this progress, but actually it's erosion. So every time we hand over a piece of mental capacity to a machine to make life easier for ourselves, we're also inherently making ourselves less necessary. It's not a reason to fear AI in itself. It's a reason to wake up and to develop and evolve and transform. Because if you want to future-proof your earnings and your future, along with helping others around you do the same thing, the first thing you need to understand is your value has always come from the tension between what is easy and what is difficult. It's that gap in the middle, because ease doesn't create opportunity. The friction does. So you can hear friction as another word for problems or challenges. The people who are going to thrive the most in this next era that's developing are the ones that reintroduce intelligent friction deliberately, consciously, and creatively. So for this next part, I'm going to look at the dangerous comfort of automation. Recently at MIT, researchers studying how AI impacts the human brain found something quite disturbing. Two cohorts of students, one using ChatGPT, the other without, were asked to write essays on a certain topic. The ones using ChatGPT, their brain activity dropped significantly compared to the ones that didn't use AI. They were less engaged, less attentive, and less creative. And to compound that, when they were asked afterwards to recite or recall what they'd just written, the ones that had used AI couldn't remember. So effectively, they'd become a bit stupid. So in simple terms, what had happened is that they'd provided and produced work that looked intelligent, but their brains weren't actually doing the work anymore. So it's easy to dismiss this type of story as a one-off experiment. But think about what it means in a larger context. As an example, we've all been asked some simple questions, and we've probably picked up our phones and had a look to see where, how to get somewhere, or simple arithmetic answers or whatever we could do in our head. It's becoming increasingly ingrained in our processes to, rely on this thing rather than to think and to use our own brains. We've spent decades building tools to reduce our cognitive effort. Calculators, search engines, GPS, autocorrect, spelling and grammar. And now AI takes it to the next level because we don't even need to think about that. That's hard coded into a lot of applications these days. And because of that, it's no longer assisting us. What it's doing is it's removing the struggle, the friction that enabled us to understand things in the first place. Because that struggle and that friction is where growth and learning happens to begin with. So as an example of that, if you've ever read a difficult book or you have tried to explain a complex concept, you'll know exactly what that feels like. You have to think about that. That, can create some, effective, difficulties, and that effort hurts. Sometimes physically, but it is that discomfort that forges connection and insight. Now imagine an entire generation of people of demographic growing up without that process, never needing to wrestle with ambiguity, never holding conflicting ideas long enough to form a judgment, always deferring to something for a polished answer rather than one that they develop themselves. So that might produce polished answers, but they won't own those answers. And here's where the risk multiplies significantly, because if we stop thinking deeply and have those cogs moving in our head and we rely on something else, we're also not thinking about the gaps and what's missing in that thought process. We basically will stop challenging bias and questioning assumptions and examining motives. We become consumers of output rather than creators of meaning. So that's not just a bad idea for individuals, you, me, your peers and colleagues and friends and family, but it's also catastrophic for companies and economies that are built on innovation. And that takes me on to the next part, which is capitalism without thinkers. I've covered some of this in previous videos, so please feel free to check them out and have a look and comment and subscribe and like and all that. So let's get into this here. Our entire economic system, from education to enterprise, has been designed entirely around human mental labour. We complicate everything because inherently complication and complexity creates hierarchy, control and profit. It's created thousands, hundreds of thousands of businesses fulfilling the same as other businesses, and that is based on inefficiencies and complexity. Additionally, we make laws, compliance and governance, red tape structures, workflows and processes because the act of managing them creates value, employment, and profit. AI is the ultimate simplifier. It strips complexity down to code, decisions, and outcomes. Faster, cleaner, and cheaper. And if we let that happen without deep thought, we risk dismantling the very scaffolding that supports human-driven capitalism. Because capitalism needs thinkers. It needs people to plan, strategize, invent, market, and lead, and manipulate that complexity, because that creates employment. And if those layers collapse, if decision making becomes algorithmic, then our role shifts from being an architect of the system to being a curator and caretaker of the system, users rather than creators. And when that happens, our earnings will depend not on our skill, but on our access to the platforms, the data and algorithms that whole thing runs on. So it's not just a shift in the jobs market that we're seeing right now. This is an entire redistribution of power from human agency to machine systems. So where does the human value live now? And where does that leave us? So if humans can think, where does our human value move to? And this is where the hope lies. And it's really quite positive and it's real. AI can essentially produce information, but what it can't do is does not understand consequence. It doesn't have skin in the game. It doesn't know the emotional, ethical, or cultural weight of the decisions that it's making. And that gap between intelligence and wisdom is where the future of human contribution and lives will exist. So future-proofing your earnings isn't about learning to code or outpacing machines. It's about understanding meaning, being able to read a situation, sense a shift, understand a tone, connect ideas that don't belong together. These are inherently human traits, and they're not going to go anywhere soon. As AI takes over the mechanical layers of our thinking, essentially moving up the chain of command in a business or our environment, it also will force us up those layers towards judgment, empathy, synthesis and leadership. So the very skills that sit at the top of an organisation will now become the baselines for survival, because these are the ones that are going to be the last out the door, the ones turning the lights off. That is going to be a very, very long way off, so no fear on that one. So if you want to stay relevant, stop thinking about jobs and start thinking about functions and roles, because roles are fluid and adapt and jobs are static, and jobs belong to systems and roles belong to people. So you're not protecting a profession. What you're doing is you're protecting a perspective. So what needs to happen is that there needs to be a reintroduction of friction intelligently, because to stay valuable you have to stay friction fit, because that's the basis of our existence, is being able to problem solve friction. So that doesn't mean rejecting AI technology and automation and everything that's making our life easier, because actually we're humans, we want life to be easy. That doesn't mean rejecting any of that. What it means is using those tools with awareness. Let them do the heavy lifting, but don't let them do the thinking, because the thinking they're not very good at anyway. You can let them inform you, give you the information, but they should not define the ultimate outcome, because the more friction that you hold in your own mind and can still turn those cogs, that friction being ambiguity, contradiction, feelings, emotions, uncertainty, the more useful you will become and the more value you will be able to provide. Just think about the entrepreneurs, the creators and the leaders that you respect. They're not the ones that know everything, because people aren't superhuman like that. They're the ones that can handle not knowing everything, and some of them not much at all, and still move forward. And that's the skill we're losing to automation. By contrast, it's the one thing that will matter most in the years ahead for us. So let's get on to the real future-proofing. So future-proofing isn't about chasing trends, shiny objects, new technology and wow, or mastering every new tool that comes past you. It's about preserving your ability to be able to think independently and creatively in a dependent world. Because the minute you stop thinking, you stop noticing and observing. And the moment you stop observing, that's being observant, you start being managed by those systems you didn't design, and you will miss the opportunities that are the gaps that you will notice if you were observing. So AI is not going to take over the world in some sort of cinematic destruction, Hollywood style. Big flames and car crashes and, some drama. It's going to take over quietly. We're seeing this already. It's taking some of the most basic problematic challenges away from people that don't want to do them in the first place. Customer service, that type of thing, chatbots, because that's convenient. And it's creating dependency through our willingness to avoid engaging, communicating, and these other things that we've discussed earlier. And the ones that are going to thrive are those that stay awake, the ones that actually don't give up everything to the easiest method out there. It'll be those that hold the tools but still ask the questions. They still have curiosity. They still have creativity. They'll see the bigger picture. They'll question it. And they're the ones that will continue to join the dots that the machines cannot see. And that's where the next generation of success and wealth and comfort and careers will come from. Not from information, because that's coming out of the technology, but it'll be from the interpretation of that. It's the human element, the human layer on top. So it's not from the data, it's from discernment. Computers cannot do discernment. In the same way, it's not coming from algorithms. It's coming from awareness, because again, that is a specifically human trait. So when I get asked, and when you ask, and when I think about it, how do I future-proof my earnings? The future is not found in a new platform or a new certification. It's found in the way we think. So we need to protect it, we need to nurture it, and we need to challenge it. We need to push ourselves to continuously evolve and not use technology as a replacement for what inherently we have already that is superior. Because in a world that's automating absolutely everything at every drop of a hat, and anything out there, every business is looking for something to automate in order to make a little bit of money in a pretty hectic and frenetic world, genuine human thought and human ability, genuine human thought will soon be one of the rarest and most valuable currencies on earth. So don't outsource your mind, because your future, my future, and our future depends on it. In addition to this context, so I've done some other videos which cover the same type of thing, looking at the behind the scenes, behind the curtains methods of how to develop your career, not through the most basic elements that we're all taught and everyone uses and learns, but through some other ways. So I'm sure you found this video useful. It's a new perspective on things. In light of the changing dynamic of the workforce, how we work, where we work, and what we do, this does need some thought. We are evolving into a space where traditional outcomes are not going to be so relevant. So maybe you're exiting the workforce, maybe you're joining the workforce. It's relevant to both of those cohorts. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon.